just about to bring Mark in, and well, we have a lot to talk about indeed. Mark, what a pleasure to see you again. And well, I suppose I should say, well, what a fantastic background, and rather prescient indeed. How are you doing?
I'm good, Alex. I'm good. It's it's been a few weeks since we were on, and the world, at some sense, has changed enormously, and on the other hand, it hasn't changed at all. So, what better to do than take ourselves away from this world for an hour and a half and go somewhere else?
Indeed. Well, I suppose what's always evident about Uplink and pretty much everything we do in space rocks is that it's never fully removed. But I think something that underlies everything about what we do is a fundamental optimism. Just an idea, of what may be, not just what is. And I think these days, that's just the tonic for it. And I guess it's fitting that we have Gavin Rothery. I shouldn't say just joining us, but also returning Space Rocks. Of course, he joined our first ever Space Rocks event, didn't he?
Indeed, yeah. I was just writing to somebody earlier on today, somebody that we had invited, wasn't able to come at the time, in April 2018. I had to go back through quite a few emails to find that. So it's been a while. So we'll be nearing our third anniversary soon. Whether we'll have any live events, physical in-person live events in 2021 remains to be seen. But there's lots of science and technology and sociology, let's say, to get through before we can consider that. But yeah, it's been great doing Uplink, of course, and keeping the flame alive. And as we'll mention maybe later on, lots of guests coming up in the next few weeks. So lots to expect from us in the coming year.
Yeah, some great things happening, and I suppose it's interesting to have Gavin joining us, of course, because I mean he's a person who he's a storyteller, a myth maker. He deals in, I don't want to say future dystopias, but imagined futures. I think science fiction can sometimes cloud what really is almost like a modern mythology in a way, just because so much of science fiction they're moral tales. They're like our Aesop's fables, or these parables are so valuable to us, right?
Yeah, in a way, I saw a discussion earlier on this week, I think or in the last week, from somebody about, what is science fiction? What does it do? Why should I bother at all? And I think, one of the great answers there is that it's not actually about all of that outer space stuff or deep future stuff. It's in a sense, it's taking an experiment, which is us, and then expanding the parameter space a bit and then poking it and see what we would do under those circumstances. And of course, we do them anyway under circumstances which seem very mundane, but let's just put human beings in a slightly unusual position and see how they'd respond there. And well, indeed, I mean, Gavin's work, as people have hopefully seen the film Moon, and many people haven't seen his new film, which we'll try and talk about but skirt around this evening, Archive. It's exactly that. It's how humans behave under extreme circumstances, fashioned with technology, fashioned with science fiction, but it's not really about that. It's really about the human beings.
Indeed. Well, I suppose without further ado, we should bring him in, and like you say, that's some very heavy skirting around. We've been very lucky and privileged to have seen Archive, and what a film it is. Let's just see if the technology can actually match the content. All right, there we are. Gav, how are you doing, man? Great to see you again.
Hey, how's it going? We're good. Yeah,
we're all here. Absolutely, great stuff.
We're all here indeed, and a bit of a family reunion, of course. When you joined us for the first ever Space Rocks event in 2018, it was very much off the back of our fascination with Moon, of course. But since then, Archive has been released stateside. It's out this month in the UK, and elsewhere. And I suppose a running theme in both of these are robotic counterparts. Not just tools, but other kind of manufactured people, right? So I guess just broadly as a kickoff, Gav, to frame the conversation, why do you think we're so fascinated with robots? Of course, Mark has Metropolis in his background there. I mean, where does it begin? Why do you think it means so much to us?
Well, I think it's because robots are very, very cool. And what I'm finding myself is that I grew up with the idea of robots being really cool. I mean, we've all seen R2D2, 3PO, Huey, Dewey, Louie, and Silent Running. Like these kind of characters, they're really magical. Like there's a lot. They just have this kind of quality about them because they're not human, but they're kind of behaving human, and most of the time they don't even have faces. And so a lot of what I found when I was doing archive was that a lot of the kind of reason that these robots seem to be working, as far as I could figure out, was because they only really work in films that are really well written and really well acted. And it's because the robots themselves don't do much, and what you get is the bounce off the blank face. And it just, like, if it's really well made, if it's well written and well acted by everybody else, it just lights up and becomes alive in your mind. And I found that my take on it was that the best robots that I enjoyed kind of come alive in your head more than they do on screen, if that makes sense. It's like R2D2. I mean, Kenny Baker did a great job, inside R2D2 for sure. But, you look at Ben Burtt's sound design with R2D2's voice, you look at the way that he's portrayed in the story and the conversations that he has with Luke, really, Mark Hamill's doing most of the heavy lifting in that conversation. R2D2 is just beeping and chirping and turning his head. And there's something about that kind of magical bounce that I find really fascinating. So that's the stuff that I find personally most interesting about robots. It's the way that you kind of bring what you want the robot to be to the robot. It kind of bounces off the robot and comes back at you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing I wanted to pick up on there is, I mean, we'll come to archive and talk to what extent we can about the specifics there. But I was sort of, I pulled up this background image of Maria from Metropolis, which, of course, in many ways, the prototype for C-3PO. I mean, pretty much looks the same. And I think Ralph McQuarrie made that nod when he did the design. But
yeah.
In Metropolis, Maria, of course, is a human and is transferred into a robot body. And then the new version of Maria is used to trick people. And so one of the things which seems to be a bit of a trope in robot films sometimes, not all of them, is that the robot becomes duplicitous as well. And if you think about the ending of Ex Machina, for example, where we're all completely suckered in by that robot being human, there's a point at which that robot just isn't human and is not actually us. And so sometimes there's that. I mean, do you find that that's an important aspect of what you do, that they be human to a point, but not to the point where they are us? Because that's the uncanny valley thing, right? They're not actually human after all.
Well, I was trying to go the other way with that, funnily enough. I mean, the one thing that I found myself in the real world, I mean, we're in 2021 now. It's quite futuristic now. We're getting into futuristic times. Like, we can all remember when we were kids thinking 2001 was the big futuristic year, right? That's 20 years ago now. It's a long time ago. We're really starting to get out there now. And in many ways, you can live your life every day and you can look around and you can be like, yep, same as yesterday. Tomorrow's going to be the same as this. But then you can watch a YouTube clip of SpaceX and what they're doing. And you can just look at it and just have your mind blown and just think, yeah, this is not the same as yesterday. And tomorrow will be different. And you look at companies like, I mean, Boston Dynamics have been bought out a couple of times now, haven't they? But look at the stuff they've been doing, especially with like Atlas. I mean, I think a lot of that stuff's kind of dropped under the radar a little bit now. When that stuff was first starting to get put together, like things like the original Big Dog, every time they released something, it'd go all over the place on YouTube. People would be sharing it. And we're so used to seeing that stuff now that they've moved past it so many times. I mean, Spot got quite a lot of attention when Spot came out. Spot's cool. But Atlas seems to be where it's really at. And if you saw any of the recent parkour videos of Atlas and the dancing videos for New Year's, that stuff now is so kind of, I don't want to say it's standard because it's obviously still like cutting edge, but it doesn't wow us anymore because we've seen loads of that stuff. And so now it's like, oh my God, look what they're doing now. And robots in real life have gone from being, wow, cool, look at that cool thing, that's awesome, to kind of, oh my God, these things are going to enslave and rule over us one day, probably not in the not too distant future. Because you can see, I mean, when I look at that stuff, you can see the military applications. You can imagine these things being sent into combat. I'm sure that any government would love a military force that they could just put in a crate and put in a wardrobe between combat missions. These things are definitely going to end up being sicked on people at some point. I mean, we've already seen all the stuff going on with drones, even though they're still operated by humans, as far as we know. This automated warfare stuff's bound to happen. And I mean, I was watching a fantastic video a couple of days ago of a guy at an airsoft match. He's playing in Holland actually, and he had an automatic Glock pistol, like a fully automatic Glock, with like, he had a high cap magazine, so I think it had about 90 rounds or something in it, and he had it on a drone, just like a little sports drone, the really fast ones that do flips and stuff. And there's no rules on the airsoft game for drones because no one had ever done it, so he just made it and took it along, and it was a Glock, an automatic Glock, like just literally gaffer taped onto a drone. And the scenario they were playing was an assault on a building, and he's talking it through. He's like, okay, we play this one every weekend. We always get destroyed on the way in because they're all on the roof and they can just open ground, so we can't get into them. So I'm going to fly this drone, and I'm going to put the drone up. I'm going to shoot them off the roof. And whilst they're busy not knowing what's going on with that, we're just going to run in. And he did it. And he had this drone with this pistol on it, and it was just going buzzing around, taking everybody out. Had a camera on it, and the video that he was showing was from the drone. And he put graphics over showing when it got hits and stuff. And it's like, this is a guy at home with a drone that he bought off the shelf, a pistol that he bought off the shelf, like an airsoft pistol, gaffer taped together, improvising that in a field with one of his friends. And it's like, yeah, that was far too effective. It was amazing. Totally swung the match. Nobody knew how to deal with it. And, afterwards, they had a big argument about rules and stuff. You can't do that. It's cheating, blah, blah, blah. It started a big argument. And it was so effective. These things are bound to happen. So I'm going off on one a bit now, talking about...
Well, I'll come back to the Boston Dynamics in a bit, but go on, finish the thought.
Yeah, well, my kind of broader point is that the real life stuff is getting very kind of scary and weird looking now. Like it's, you've got robots that can run faster than people. They can jump higher than people. They can do everything. I think a lot of us are still used to the notion of a robot being R2-D2. It's like a little clunky dustbin that can't get down the stairs. And that's not where we are now. We're not far having robots that will run up the outside of your wall and double flip in through a second-story window and land on one leg in like a quarter of a second.
Yeah, I'm fully with you. I mean, of course, so much of our, kind of imagination is, if you're my generation or beyond, it's Robbie the robot, right? He's basically got these vacuum cleaner kind of tube arms. You're not thinking, nanoswarms, or things that are completely invisible or almost unimaginable.
It's a shame that the military applications are the ones that are so obvious. Like it's bound to be doing that. I mean, one of the things that really kind of stuck out to me was Fukushima, when we had the Fukushima disaster. Remember, was that 2014? Was it before that? It was a while ago now.
That's right.
I remember everybody asking, like, where are the robots? Like, we're in Japan, you need machines to go and investigate all of this crazy radiation leakage that's going on. Where are all the cool robots? It's like 2014 or whatever it was. And I remember people talking like, just bring the robots out. You must have robots that can do this now. And they didn't. And like now they actually would have, like, you could send Atlas and Spot down to, to try and clear a load of debris and do whatever they need to do, investigate pipes and stuff. And I think there was a thing with Elon Musk talking about robotics, and he said something, and it freaked me out and amazed me at the same time. And he was talking about, they were having a conversation about robots, and he mentioned robots that you couldn't see. And I just thought that was like, what are you talking about? What, an invisible robot? Like, how are you going to do that? And he explained that it's not that you can't see it, it's just that it's moving so quick, you can't see it. And he was talking about being in a room and you could have a robot that was in the room. It's not inconceivable, like in the near future. And the robot would just be running around the walls so fast, you'd hear it, it'd make all kinds of weird noises, but you couldn't see it. And he was saying, like, you need to use a strobe light to be able to see it. So you'd have to actually have a strobe on and you just get snatches of it when it's caught in the light that your brain can kind of process. I remember listening to him talking about this, and just at first, when he first said invisible robots, I immediately just went, what are you talking about? That's ridiculous. And then in a couple more sentences, he explained it and it made complete sense. My brain did a total 180 and I was just like, wow, that's amazing. And that's just one thing that one guy said, which was just blew my mind all by itself. And I mean, the kind of stuff that we're going to see getting rolled out, it's just going to be weird. There's going to be some weird stuff.
So, I mean, that invisibility thing, I have to think about it myself a bit. But even if it's not invisible, even if it can move, let's say 3 or 4 times as fast as we can, I mean, it's a little bit like trying to catch a fly, right? You can't, because its reactions are so much quicker than ours. I mean, you might get lucky once in a while, but, if you try to approach small animals with small brains but more rapidly connected brains, it seems. I'm not a biologist, so I'm maybe not saying the right thing, but they react much quicker than we do. And so you don't really need to amp a robot up very far before it can actually just outmaneuver us completely. And that's kind of a trope, right? I mean, it's kind of bullet time. It's that kind of idea in science fiction that if you just speed things up by a factor of 10, you just run around the room. And I'm sure we've seen robots in films do that, I guess. But your robots don't. Your robots don't do that. I mean,
they're the ones without much character, the ones that do that, right? Those are the devices in stories rather than characters generally.
Right.
Because what I like robots as characters. So I was really keen with Archive to portray the robots with vulnerability, instead of, because the normal trope is the robots are stronger and the robots are, smarter and faster and they're superior to people. And I really wanted to get into a bit of space where we could see the robots actually had their own vulnerabilities.
And that, in part, without going into the story too much detail, is because they're trying to be full facsimiles of humans rather than being developed beyond humans. I mean, I was just thinking about Ex Machina again, and it's a while since I've seen it, but the end game there seemed to be to design a robot which was as human as possible, and yet, it knew that it wasn't, right? And so was it important to you for your robots that they knew that they weren't human? Obviously, physically, they could see by looking at themselves that they weren't the same as the lead character, but how did that play through? Because you go through generations of robots and they have kind of different levels of cognizance of their surroundings, let's put it that way.
Yeah, well, it frames the robot's dilemma, basically. For those of you who haven't seen Archive yet, who might be interested in watching it, basically what we're talking about here is the arc of most of the film is the development of 3 robots, or more specifically, the third in a line of 3 robots. That's really what the story covers. And so there are 3 robot characters in the film. They're the J series robots. We have J1, J2, and J3, and each robot gets more sophisticated with each model. And because the robots are trying to emulate a human personality, we have a 6-year-old version, which is J1, a 15, 16-year-old version, which is J2, and we have a 32, 33-year-old version, which is J3, which is the final product. So the idea is that they're all shades of the same person at different stages in their personality, but they all share the same broad subset of emotions. Like, they all like the same things, they all dislike the same things, but they do it in different ways because they have different different stages of evolution, if you like, in the minds. So they all have different reactions to the same thing. If that makes sense.
Yeah. But again, it was important to you that they be, in that sense, sort of facsimiles of human. But as you say, I find that a fascinating thing. I mean, again, you've said it, so we'll follow that. This idea that they're at different ages. Because if you go back, you mentioned Silent Running, right? Huey, Dewey, and Louie, they're all kids, right? In a sense, they're not thought to be adults. But then you get to Marvin the paranoid android, and he's kind of superhuman in some ways, that he's beyond human. And you decided to sort of interpolate with the same personality. I found that fascinating in the film. So how did you come to that idea in the first place? What was the motivation for that?
Well, it was really, I mean, the real motivation for the story was originally all about trying to get someone back from, like, reviving someone from beyond the grave using technology. And the whole idea of the iteration of the robots came from how I imagined that might actually play out for real. Like, it just seemed really, I mean, it's a stretch doing something that technologically sophisticated anyway, but it just occurred to me that you'd have multiple goes at it and before you got it right. And I just thought, when I thought of that and how that might play out, it just sort of stuck as a cool idea that you'd have these vestigial efforts of his work, and you wouldn't just switch, like, you'd keep them around, you'd be attached to them, and they would provide some utility as well. So particularly with J2, like, you'd rope her into some work in the same way that, when we're younger, like, our fathers might rope us into doing jobs for them or whatever. It's like, come and help me sweep the snow from the driveway or whatever. You're doing things like that. So the idea is that the original idea for the writing was to write a family dynamic. So we've got George, who's a protagonist, who's the only, like, actual human in the facility. And then we've got the 2 daughters. We've got J1, who's a 6-year-old, and J2, who's a 16-year-old, and they're his daughters. And then J3, as we pretty much start the film, we see J3 being powered up for the first time and joining them. So she's like a new stepmom that joins a house. So the idea is, originally what I was kind of trying to set up was like a dynamic of a widower with 2 kids and getting remarried, and the new mum coming to join the house. and the kind of things that might stir up in there, and then take that inspiration and superimpose that in a science fiction setting using mostly robots.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the interesting thing, though. I mean, just to, bring in a real world example. I recently acquired an Alexa, right? And I was joking about this, but it's remarkable. I had to stop saying please and thank you because it just felt wrong to order this thing around. I ask it for time. I say, would you play this on spot? Whatever else. And what's amazing, taking it out of archive and going back in, films like Castaway, for instance, completely removed from this conversation, but for one thing, you get emotionally involved with the volleyball with a face drawn on it, right?
Funny you should say that, because Castaway was an inspiration for archive because that dynamic worked so well.
Right. Interesting. See, because I guess I'm fascinated by that because this actually links with so much of Space Rocks, because of course anyone who followed the Rosetta mission, will know that the Rosetta probe, was anthropomorphized in this way. It was given a cartoon personality, and so in a way it sounds like Mark. I mean, people developed emotional attachments with things that don't actually give off any kind of emotional heat otherwise, but it's almost like it's not what they're giving off, it's what you're bringing to. Because I was heartbroken.
Yeah, we do that every day though. I mean, I've got an emotional attachment with my car. I've got somewhat of an emotional attachment with the kettle and the coffee machine. Machines have personalities, right? The more complex a machine, the more personality you get. I mean, you guys will know this better than me with the kind of complex machines that you work with. I understand it through like my work PC, which can sometimes be temperamental and develop its own little. You got to persuade it to work, and tell it you're going to take it out for a nice meal, and you got to kind of work with machines sometimes to make them work right. They have their own personality. I mean, I've got a couple of power tools that I don't think they like me very much, like the way they behave. They have their own personalities, and I feel like they're actually hostile towards me. We do that all the time. We anthropomorphize all the time, and I think the more complex machinery we work with, the more we do that.
Yeah. So I have a story I may have told before on Uplink, but you won't have heard it, Gavin. So related to Rosetta, we did this thing with the cartoons where they then had their, both of the spacecraft, Rosetta and Philae, had a voice. That got really popular. Kids were following along. Kids were getting very attached to it. And I think it would be wrong of me to say that I got sick of it, but at some point you really begin to question, what are you actually doing here? You're deliberately setting people up to believe in something that's just not true.
You're lying to them, Mark. You're lying to everybody.
Well, indeed, and it was that fine balance between engaging, but to the point where people were saying, well, you can't kill the spacecraft because my kids won't be able to go to sleep at night.
Well, I mean, you're totally right. I have to do this as a writer and a director. I have to mess with people's emotions. Yeah. I have to try and make people feel happy or sad, and with the actors as well. When you're working with them, sometimes a lot of it's like manipulation that you've got to do to get things right. I mean, you look at people like Stanley Kubrick, who's like regarded as being like one of the best directors ever, and watch the making of The Shining, and look at the way he treated the actress Shelley Duvall, who plays the female lead of The Shining. Look at the way he treated her to get that amazing performance, which was pretty much her having a real nervous breakdown because of the way he was treating her in real life whilst he was shooting. And Kubrick comes away from the film going, oh, look at that amazing work I've just done. And he's got this poor woman who's been abusing her for months, and there's a lot of grey lines in there, but I mean, you're right. Like, there's a lot of manipulation to do sometimes.
So the thing was, at the end, as we came to the end of the mission, there was this sort of thing about, well, how do we finish off the cartoon series? We need to give finality to the kids, but we don't want to break their hearts. And I was out on my bike one day, and I came up with this idea because I'd seen an amazing short advert by, I'm sure you've seen it, by Spike Jones, for IKEA, the furniture store. And I think it was in the American market, but it's it's available online. And the whole thing is it sets up this huge emotion over an angle poised lamp, which was bought from IKEA, and it had been sitting around for a while. And the protagonist, the woman, goes out to buy a new lamp. She brings it home. It's much shinier. It's much prettier. She gets rid of the old one and puts it out on the curb. And then it starts raining, and and the music's going and everything. It's violins, the whole thing, and then a guy walks in shot at feet level because you're looking down at the angle poised lamp, and it pans up to him, and in a fake Swedish voice he says, some of you feel sorry for this lamp. That's because you're crazy. This lamp has no feelings, and besides, the new one's better. And then he walks off. And I wanted to do that as the final cartoon for Rosetta and say, some of you kids believe this robot's real. It isn't. Grow up, you know. But
Santa's not real, and there is no more Christmas.
But nobody wanted us to follow that idea. But the weird coda to that is that IKEA themselves chickened out years later, and they came back and made a new version where they said it's perfectly okay to be attached to the old lamp because here it is being recycled and being used and loved by somebody else. And I thought, you chickens, you could have just done it, but anyway.
So what did you do with the probe then? Did you say like she's gone to live on a farm?
Well, funnily enough, one of the things people said is that you must land the two space, because Philae had landed in 2014, and people said you've got to land Rosetta next to it in order that they can live together on the comet. And that made no sense technically or scientifically. So we had to make the cartoon show them far enough apart that, you know, they were kind of within sight of each other. But what we did, and this was another idea I had, was actually we referenced the science fiction film that we made called Ambition. So the short sci-fi film made in Iceland with Aidan Gillen from Game of Thrones, set in the deep future, and they talk about Rosetta as kind of a stepping stone along the route towards them becoming, I don't know, whatever they are, magicians of outer space. And so what we did at the end was somebody said, well, why don't you have somebody discover the probes? We send an astronaut down to get them. I said, well, we don't want to give that. That's false hope because there's no astronauts going there tomorrow to pick these probes up. But what if we bring these characters from the other franchise, so to speak, in to discover them millions of years later? Then at least there's hope, but it's not tomorrow. I don't think most people actually got it because most people who watched the cartoons were kids, and the people who watched the science fiction film.
This. I'm impressed.
Well, you know, we had a lot of time on our hands, maybe in between parts of the mission, but it's there. You can watch it online. So it finishes off by crossing the franchises, and I like that also, bringing the live action film into cartoon form, but using the voices. So we got the actress in, Aisling Franciosi, and we recorded her so that she appeared in cartoon form in the cartoon film. But yeah, it was fun at the time. But
indeed, well, I mean, this is I think one of the fundamentals of Space Rocks. You know, so much of what ESA has done, with Rosetta, of course, Mark, with your leadership, and of course, I guess Gavin is conveying powerful ideas. It becomes easier when people care and they have an emotional response. So, I mean, combining big ideas with things that tug at the heartstrings or make people feel something is so much more powerful, and that's the essence of what we do. And I mean, going back, I think for a moment to some of your inspirations to get beyond the volleyball of Castaway and so on. I mean, when you mentioned Kubrick, my mind didn't immediately go to The Shining, Gav. It went to obviously 2001, and I don't know if HAL actually qualifies as a robot, although technically HAL is the ship, so in some sense, but I mean, he is a box with a light, but you grow so attached and you begin to care so much about him. I mean, I wondered some of the genetic material, some of the other DNA strands that you pulled from, the things that have kind of inspired what you put into your films.
Well, The Shining was a big one, excuse me, because it's one of my favorite films, but The Shining does a lot of things very well, and one of the things that I always loved was the way that it created this sense of a big space with hardly any people in it. And with Archive, if I'd have had like a bigger budget, I would have made the facility a lot bigger and I was trying to make it feel as big and as empty as possible. And I would have loved it if it felt like a facility that could have housed like 60 people and there's just one guy living in it. And he's like having his breakfast in a big empty breakfast hall, just sat at one table. And there's like 40 chairs and tables. I would have loved to have kind of opened it out a little bit like that. But, you do what you can with what you've got. So I was trying to make it feel as big as I could. But so The Shining was a really big one because that sense of sort of spooky, empty place was something that was quite important. Not just for the kind of straight read of the film, but if people go back and watch the film on a second level, there's other reasons for doing that. Other tonal reasons specifically for doing that. But let's see Moon was a big inspiration for me because I was trying to sort of step on top of the work I did for Moon to, it's everything you do is like climbing a ladder, right? So I was trying to kind of elevate the work I did on Moon and take things to a next level. So the robots J1 and J2 are very much cousins of Gertie that I designed on Moon. And funnily enough, 2001 was more of an influence on Moon, and Gertie was directly influenced by HAL. When I was designing Gertie, I was really going for a HAL vibe, because what I wanted to do with Gertie was use the kind of single lamp eye, lens eye, illuminated lens eye kind of vibe you get from HAL, to put that up front so that people would expect that to become menacing, and then that meant we could do something else with it with the story, where he doesn't actually go down that path and he ends up helping him. So I think those kind of things, I find them quite useful in storytelling, because there are some tropes that are so obvious that if you put them out there, people sort of lock onto them, and it lets you do different things with the story. And I find those kind of stories can be quite pleasing if you get it right. So likewise with Archive, you know, you can see with J2, she's got a single eye, which is a real callback to Gertie, and she's supposed to basically, J1 and J2 are basically meant to look like, in some way, mobile cousins of Gertie. That was the idea of them. There's all kinds of things in the architecture that I was doing which are like sort of somewhat akin. Also like the motion graphics on the screens and stuff. There's lots of sort of base touching in there.
Just before you move on though, because it just suddenly gelling, it all came to me. You make a Black Mesa reference in there as well, so it's GLaDOS as well, right? From Portal.
No, actually, that wasn't.
No?
I mean, you could join those dots, but that one wasn't intentional. The Black Mesa reference. Basically, I love Half-Life. I love Half-Life. Half-Life 2 is just, it's the original great game for me. Half-Life 2 on the PC is just where everything really opened up for me, and all the kind of media's merged. You've got, cinema. It feels like you're a film, but you're playing it, and they've just done it right. And I've always just been such a huge fan of Valve, and I've had so much love for it that I couldn't help but put a lot of shouts out to Half-Life in there whilst I was making the film, just because it's all just like sort of geek love stuff, really. But it's just all me trying to say hello to Valve, really.
Yeah.
So there was a touch on that. I actually tried to. If you might have noticed that Theo, when he puts his glasses on, looks quite a lot like Gordon Freeman. I think Theo would make a fantastic Gordon Freeman. The bit where J3, there's a bit near the end of the film where she smashes a big video screen, and she actually picks up a crowbar. That's like a little shout out. She picks up a crowbar and chucks it at the screen. I was wanting to put a companion cube in the equipment locker and just have it just kind of off in the sky. But the budget was so tight, I couldn't afford to make a companion cube. That's how tight we were on the budget.
But now I'm going to call you out, because I don't think it's a budget thing. It might be, but there's Thunderbirds written all over this thing as well, right? I mean, if your base is not a Thunderbird's lair hidden away somewhere else, even with the way that again, I don't want to say too much, but the bits retract and bits move, right? I mean, is that on purpose, or is that budget?
We all love moving retractable things.
Of course, absolutely, it's brilliant, right? Yeah. The overhead shots on things going over movable bridges, it's brilliant.
Well, this is something I really wanted to pick up on. I mean, I think it speaks to just the personality of robotics, but also just your own craft, because anyone that follows you on Twitter, will be immediately struck by many images of kitchen tables, and here's a bunch of stuff over here, because so much of your work is characterized by this incredible attention to detail and physical effects. Now, I've read things, we've talked about it, but I think some of the people who are watching might be curious as to your work there and the reasons why, because people are so accustomed to seeing CGI, but it feels like there is so much presence when a thing is actually there. Yeah,
I mean, I think there's a few parts to this. As a filmmaker, ultimately, you are boxed in by a budget. There's two kind of resources, really, that you're working with: time and money, right? And you're boxed in by those resources. Quite often, making practical things is cheaper. It just restricts you in certain ways because there's things you can't do with them. But they save you usually on time and money, because you're making the thing, so you've already got it. And then when you're filming it, it's there and you don't have to do anything with it afterwards. Now, it can, depending what you're talking about, this can all change, of course. I mean, there's so much to this, it's hard to answer, really. Obviously, practical things are awesome. I like going into things with as much as possible. You hear these kind of things a lot, but they're true. Actors like having a world to work with. I like having a world to work with. I mean, both with Archive and with Moon, I designed the sets as like continuous environments. So you go in, close the door, and you're in there. you walk around, you go from room to room down corridors, and you're in the place. You have to open another door and step outside, and then you're back out in the studio. So, you know, I've done it twice now, with, like I say, with Archive and Moon. There's a lot of similarities. All the work I did on Archive was based around what I did on Moon. And this sounds really bad. Like when we were doing Moon, we were making it all up. We didn't know what to do. Like, I didn't know how to design a set. I'd never done it before. So I just did what I thought would be cool, and it worked. And it's the same thing with Archive. Like, I'm just doing what I think is going to be cool, and, you know, what we can afford to do and what's going to hopefully be coolest. And it's really good when you, I mean, the thing is, I kind of take that route because it seems like the most obvious route, to be honest. And I prefer it because it makes everything real. I can see it all. And I know that it's one of the most important things. I know it's at a certain level. If we build a set and I can walk in a warehouse and see it, I know when it's good. I know when it looks good. I can take photos of it. I can wander around it with my own camera. I can find some good angles. And I know when I've got it right. And also, I know when it's missing things. So I can do that during the process of the build, and I can steer things in. I mean, it's, you know, we had super tight resources, but things like sticking vinyl on the wall, like I can do that all day. That's not the expensive part. So, you know, I can go in there myself. And given that it takes, you know, 8 weeks to build a set, I've got time to, as long as I've got the forethought to do it, I've got time to walk the set. I've got time to make my own little videos and block out shots myself and just get a sense of what needs to be done where. And, you know, so I think you'd be daft not to do that. But I can't do that if it's a bunch of green screens. And then that puts me in a situation of having those same conversations in post-production where we're burning money every day. And all the post-production facility really wants is to get you to sign off shots. So that's not the time to be going in and start getting arty with things and going, well, now I've seen that one, I don't like it, let's try this. They're going to be like, no, just get this signed off, please. We've got to move on. We've got 1,500 shots to do in the next 3 months, and you're out of your budget. That's the reality.
I was just thinking, you know, there was one thing, if I can make an advice, is, you know, I spent a decent fraction of Archive wondering whether, when your relatively low mobility robots were going to trip over the door sills. I was thinking, just build the floor up above the door sill so they can walk straight without having to climb over those bloody things all the time. But I mean, it's effective because it kind of feels airlocky. It feels kind of enclosed.
Yeah, there's a good reason why I did that.
Go on then.
Well, I did it for the light. I mean, it was something I was trying to do on Moon, and we got a certain degree with it, but I had much more control over things with Archive, so I could get it just how I wanted it. And the reason why I wanted those like airlock type pressure seals on the floor, they're basically light baffles.
Right.
So I can shoot down the corridor, and there's a series of bays. And the idea is I can light each bay individually. So I can say like on, off, on, get the camera right down one end and have like George walk all the way down, and you can see him going from silhouette to light to silhouette to light, and it just looks really pretty. I really like stuff like that.
Yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense.
And the baffles came out, so when we had the robots walking down, we just lifted them up, and they had a nice flat floor.
Right. And the other thing, sorry, Alex, let me just jump in on this last one, because the one thing which I read recently, an article about this, I mean, because there is also a typography throughout your films. And it's that very classic futuristic. I don't think it is Euro style, but it's not far off Euro style by being a kind of squashed sans serif typeface. Do you actually think we'll ever see a science fiction film which is credible, where it's actually with serifs and Times Roman? I mean, I'm kind of kidding, but it's got to, I mean, it kind of has to be, right? I mean,
whilst I'm on deck, no way. If it's got anything to do with me.
I'm going to tell you this. I mean, literally, just like looking at those lovely swishy doors and all that, you know, there's like the cool Japanese character, you know, on there. Everything it just all looks, yeah. I'm with you, man. I mean, it's no comic sans in the future, clearly. But
those doors cost, they weighed a ton each, those doors.
Really?
Yeah, they were. I had to fight for those doors. I really wanted some stuff to elevate the set, and the budget was so tight, and I was insistent that we had to have moving doors because we never got them on Moon, and it broke my heart that we had crap doors on Moon that open on a hinge, because I just thought we needed something cool. We needed up or sideways.
Yeah.
I'm watching like zero budget sci-fi films people have made on YouTube, and they still figure out a way of getting a sliding door in there, even if it's like a wardrobe door or something, and it still looks good. So I was like adamant we were going to get sliding doors in there, but they were all just like dumb pieces of wood on runners, but they weighed a ton each with the frames, and we just had a couple of massive Hungarian dudes off the side of the set. They had handles built in, and they just like yank them open and push them closed.
See, this is amazing. See, because I remember reading a piece as a kid, literally, where someone was saying, so how realistic is the USS Enterprise and all that? And the first thing that came up was literally the squishy doors, because of course there's always that little squeak, when they sort of open and close, they go, and this engineer was saying, well, realistically, it would just be a curtain. And it's like, what the hell are you talking about? Like a shower curtain, like, Kirk walks in. But I guess it's just that, you need the dramatic entrance. But what I love about all of these anecdotes, Gav, is we are talking about proper indie filmmaking, right? Literally just where it sounds like you're when you're out behind the camera, you're there with a staple gun and all that kind of stuff, which is it sounds
I always will be.
Sorry?
I always will be. I mean, if my career manages to move on to bigger things, I'm still going to be there putting the vinyl on the walls.
Yeah. So how much of the again, there's some beautiful scenery in the film, but the interiors are all shot in Hungary. How much of the exterior work was done there? There's also reference. I mean, I've been around. I haven't been everywhere in Europe, but there's scenes that don't look like they come from Europe. So was there a mixture of visuals taken only on location in Europe, or were there other stock stuff brought in, or did you shoot more widely?
Well, the reality of the situation, having no budget, no time, no resources, there's two answers to that, two locations, Hungary and Norway.
Right.
The stuff in Hungary, the stuff in Hungary was all the stuff with the trees.
Right.
So the opening shots over the snowy forest, all that stuff was shot with my DJI the Mavic 2 Pro drone. The one with the 10, not the zoom, the regular Pro, with the 10-bit Hasselblad camera on it. I took that over to Hungary. I learned to fly drones because I wanted that extra. I knew that I needed some big shots to try and make the film feel cinematic, and there's no other way of doing it. So I thought, if I get a drone, I can just fly a drone over forests all day, and it'll give me something. So bought a couple of drones, learned to fly them, crashed a couple, just doing the whole drone thing. So all that stuff with the trees, that was all shot between setups from the first 2 days of shooting when we were up the mountain. And what I did is whenever we would move, there'd be like half an hour, 35 minutes for the unit to move. So all we're doing is going from that side of the hill, 200 meters to that side of the hill. But I'd have like 35 minutes. So in amongst that 35 minutes, there'd be 20 minutes where I could just kind of slope off. And so I had a couple of sites pre-spotted where I could like land and take off safely. And I just put the drone up and fly around and just grab whatever I could. And I knew that my plan was to get back in the edit and make it work when we got back. But I knew that if I had a whole bunch of, scanning around, I'd be able to sort of jump around in time and give it a sense of place. So then when we got into post, we had a whole big hall where we had no house, we had no nothing. It was just like a big question mark. And the original conversation with the post pitch was to do the whole house and environment in CG. So we basically boxed that up in our minds, went off and shot everything else, came back and like, okay, what we're going to do with this house. So I got some design work done, and we basically were told that we couldn't do it all in post because all of a sudden it would become massively expensive to do it. So we had to focus post on other things. And I mean, it's frustrating, but it's just what happened. It's just, the post conversations are very flexible one. It changes all the time when you're moving through it. So it wasn't the most unexpected thing. So my wonderful editor, Mr. Adam Biskupski, was, we were in the edit suite and we were looking around it because I needed a waterfall in there because the original inspiration for the house was falling water, Frank Lloyd Wright house. What I wanted was a bunker version of falling water. That was my original kind of, mental brief for what I wanted it to be. I worked with a great artist called, an architectural artist called Nicholas Levy, designing the house stuff. The original designs were all beautiful sunshine, like on a lake, but that all had to change and it ended up being winter up a mountain. But, that's only because when we first started shooting at the mountain, first day of the shoot, everything was covered in snow. So we shot for 2 days and then it was going to be a snow film, which ended up great, but that wasn't the plan originally.
Right.
So if you ever read the script for Archive, it doesn't describe snow until the very end of the film. So Ads found, what was it? He was looking on YouTube for what, as I said, like if you can find any placeholder stuff, have a look on YouTube for waterfalls, and we'll go to Iceland because they've got the big waterfalls.
Yeah.
We were specking out Iceland, and Now we've got snow everywhere and we couldn't afford to do anything with snow. We were all on the weather trackers waiting for when it was snowing in Iceland, and we were going to just jump on a plane, get up to like Reykjavik and hire a car, drive, even if it was all the way across like, you know, the 600-mile like trip around the country in a big ring road. Even if we got to do that, we'll go out there, we'll do it, we'll make it a fun boys adventure, and we'll just man up and go and shoot all this stuff in the middle of nowhere in the freezing cold. And we were watching the weather trackers, and we had a real window to do this because they needed to get started on the post. And what we will be doing is going out there with my drone and just basically shooting the waterfall as plates and then putting a CG house in there. So we're watching the weather tracker, and it was like, it's going to snow. No, it's not. It's going to snow. No, it's not. And we were like that for ages. And we're just texting each other every evening going, it's gone. The snow's gone. Maybe it'll come tomorrow. It's like, we're back on. We're back on. And, you know, we've got like flights being booked on a hair trigger. And it was going to be me and Ads editor and Phil Hurd producer. And we were all ready to go. And the whole thing was on and off and on and off and on and off for about 3 weeks. And we were all going crackers. And Ads found... he had a clip that he used of a waterfall, and we were in the edit suite, and it was this beautiful drone shot pulling back from a waterfall. And I was like, that's cool. That. And he had like a plateau next to it. And I was like, if that had the house on there, that'd be perfect. Where is this? And it was at a place called Manafossen in Norway, and it was a tourist video. And we're looking at it, and as soon as I saw it, I was like, that's it. That's where the house needs to be. So we changed plan, and we were going to Norway, and we watched the weather trackers. And we were like, it's snowing, it's not, it's snowing. We were back in the same loop. And we ran out of time. So we booked some flights, spent 3 days in Norway, hired a car, drove around, filmed a load of waterfalls with drones, and came back and cut them all in and CG'd the house in. And that was it. It was really simple. We had to do a bit of tweaking to get the snow in there. So there's a lot of snow fakery going on. That was a little bit of hair pulling going on, but we've made it work in the end. But yeah, it was, so it's Norway basically. So it's Norway and Hungary.
So I have a counterpoint story to that, again, going back to this film that we made with our friends in Poland for Rosetta, the Ambition film. The whole of the visual effects, concept art, everything, I mean, and all of the sort of the pre-visualization work was done based on an open cast coal mine about 100 kilometers away from Warsaw, which would have been easy to drive to, and it was all fine. And it was a fantastic jet black landscape, so a spoil heat from a coal mine, but it had some structure to it, and so all of the concept art features all of that. But they had to get permission to film, and when they applied for permission, there was an objection from Greenpeace. Greenpeace said, we can't be having people driving around on this site because it's basically spoils, and there's heavy metals in there, and if you start driving around it, you'll kick the dust up, and the people who live just over the road won't be happy about it. Now, at that point, ESA wasn't involved at all, or it wasn't known that we were involved in the making of this film. Well, we couldn't countenance that. We couldn't countenance ESA making a film where there was an objection from Greenpeace. So the thing was that it then flipped around immediately. We had to find somewhere else. And where did we go? Iceland. So instead of going 100 kilometers to the east of Warsaw, we ended up, the whole crew had to decamp for all the filming as well, for all the live action and all the cast, the two members of the cast. So, you imagine what that did to the budget, but it worked out brilliantly. I mean, there's a place not far away from Reykjavik where it's just that blasted landscape. And then we had to CGI out the grass because there wasn't supposed to be anything living on this landscape at all. So if you look at the pictures, which I have a few on Twitter, you see tufts of grass growing, all by hand deleted afterwards so that it's a blank lava landscape. So yeah, we went to Iceland, you didn't, but it worked out nice in both cases.
Well, I think the most important thing about this obviously is getting the job done, but the second most important thing is getting to have a funky little adventure whilst you're doing it.
Oh yeah.
Some of the cool little missions you get to do and the little kind of trips you get to do in filmmaking, it's just cool. It's really fun.
Yeah, well, this is something that fascinates me because, of course, so much of archive is driven by story, by characters that you care about and all that. And that is not about FX, right? That is about great writing. It's about characterizations. And it's one of those things that fascinates me, Gav, I think, because so frequently, especially in the world of sci-fi, it's always about the big ideas and all that. It's very frequently the less visually ambitious, the less of an extravaganza, but more of a character-driven plot that you end up walking away from feeling wowed by. It's almost like that Rod Serling Twilight Zone effect of, you might not have, just witnessed, a €500 million, blown on a budget, but what you have walked away with is something that's made you feel something, powerful. And I wonder, is that something that you feel is perhaps lost in like the huge enormo budget sort of films that seem to be getting cranked out? Because I frequently see these things coming, and I can't help but wonder if the writing was just a little better. That's not a CGI problem. That's just
that's the age old thing, though. I mean, you could look at, it's all about the people doing it, right? I mean, you can look at take Star Wars. Look at what's going on with Star Wars now, right? We've had all the big expensive sequels, and now we've got from what I understand, very modestly budgeted Mandalorian. And the Mandalorian's just got everybody's heart all of a sudden. Everyone loves it, and for a good reason, because it's really good and it's reaching people. And I mean, it's just different people doing jobs differently. I think it's tricky because I don't have that side of the experience yet with the whole sort of big super budget stuff. So all my experience is about doing the hands-on, lower budget, do it yourself. So I'm in that weird place where I haven't had anyone who's stopped me from doing anything yet. I haven't had to have those conversations where I'm trying to sort of argue about why this robot should look like this, or I just get to do it all. I get to design it all. If I want to do that, I can just design stuff and get it made, and it's all fine. Excuse me. So yeah, I don't know, it's a weird one. I really don't feel like I've experienced that, but I'm really thrilled that you enjoyed Archive. That does mean a lot to me. So I'll put that one in the bank.
But I wanted to go a bit, along exactly the same track, because you're a first-time director on a feature film, and yet the performances you get out of Theo, James, and Stacey Martin are truly emotional, right? I mean, and that's not obvious that you would be able to do that, right? I mean, I know, in Moon, Sam Rockwell delivers this brilliant sort of, who the hell is he performance, and as he kind of crumbles as a character. But again, there's an emotionality in that film, and there's a deep emotionality in this film. Is that something that you I'm sure you wanted, but did you have confidence going in? Because you come from a games background, a concept design background. You probably you felt that you could deliver all that stuff. You could deliver something that looked good. But did you go in with the confidence that you could get that from the actors?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing is about all of this stuff, you got to remember, like Theo and Stacey, they are really good actors. Like, they bring a lot to the party. Do you know what I mean? So for me, I think when you look at somebody like Theo, right? Theo's got a lot going on. I mean, really, I've said this before, but it's true. I really shouldn't like Theo. He's super handsome, super smart. I should really kind of hate that guy, but I can't help but love him to bits. He's a dude. I love him. Theo's like, people think of the Divergent films generally when they think about him, but what I've come to understand is that any actor that has got legitimate chops usually does theatre as well as film. And I find that quite often you can get a read on somebody with the theatre work that you just don't see in the film work. And that's what happened with Theo. When I was first introduced to him, I wasn't really aware of his work. He hadn't really been on my radar. And he did a play called Sex with Strangers at the Hampstead Theatre. And yeah, he invited me along to go and check it out. So I went to go and see him, and it was awesome. There's two people in the play, and he just completely owned it. He had the whole audience like in the palm of his hand. And I was just watching this guy he's just running away with it, just thinking, this is awesome. He's just got loads of charisma, and he can really kind of focus that when he needs to do it. So yeah, it was, and Stacey was a funny one because she was always our first choice, both myself, excuse me, and Theo, and Phil Hurd, a producer. We had a list of actresses, and Stacey was always the first choice. And I was fortunate enough in the end to be able to get to work with her. And I was just thrilled to bits. She's just got that sort of, she's half French, right? So she's just cool. She's a cool person. And I think that's what, for me, the relationship with the two of them was really important because, Theo's a legit movie star, handsome dude. And so I think it's, I really wanted somebody that fit with him, that felt like a believable relationship. Do you know what I mean? Because quite often in films, the kind of portrayal of, because it's the whole thing about Archive, it's about their bond, and it's about him doing something for her, basically. And I didn't want to get too soppy with it, and I didn't want to get too like, this love is the most burning love that's ever existed between man and woman. Like, it's just that real legit bond that someone will just not let go, you know. And for me, when I look at like most films, really, it's tricky writing a film because you don't have much time. Like, you've got like, you know, like maybe 2 hours at a stretch generally, and you've got a lot of work to do. You've got to set all your characters up. You've got to lay out your stall, introduce us to everybody so we get to know them, push them off on some kind of an adventure, usually have things break or go wrong and then fix it all. That's generally what movies do, right? What the stories of movies generally do. So you don't have that much time to spend with a character, really, in a film. I think this is one reason why TV shows are so good at the moment. Like, you get to spend so much time with the characters. It's like, if you look at something like Breaking Bad, I don't think it would have been, even if it was like a trilogy of films, it wouldn't have been anywhere near as effective as it is with a 5-season arc, because at the end of it, like, you really get Walt, you really get Jesse, like, you get all of it. Like, you spend so much time buffing up against Gus Fring. Like, it's all so good, and the characters are so believable, so fleshed out and so deep. And you don't get to do that with a film. Like, you get to like bounce off a few touchstones, and that's kind of it. And this is why when a film's really good, it picks the right touchstones and bounce just right, so that you still feel like you've got that pull. And I mean, you can do it. I mean, obviously, there's some films out there that have just got wonderful characters, even films that just got a single movie with just great characters. But it's a trick. And yeah, I wanted to try and get, I didn't want to fall into the kind of stuff that a lot of films do, which is like try and take the quick route into it, like just get through all of that. Just, you know, love equals two pretty people kissing as the sun goes down. You know, I didn't want to get into that stuff because I kind of tune out from it.
Well, let me pick up on just one technical thing, because if I don't, I have the chance to ask. Again, not trying to give anything away, but when we first meet J3, it's not the same as the final J3, so to speak. Is that, how much of that is CGI, and how, because that, I mean, the eyes seem very real, and they probably are real. But did you CGI on top of Stacey acting, or is it? How's that done? I'm just curious.
A little bit. I mean, it was all performance driven. Honestly, we had such a small budget. Going into it, I think I like to kind of look at my sort of resources for a movie. I did this with Moon, and did it again with Archive. I find that generally you've got like 3 battles you can win. There's like 3 big battles that you're able to get away with. So with Archive, the big battles I wanted to focus on was getting the set built, somehow realizing the exterior of the house so it felt like it was in a real place, and making J3, who was ultimately going to be portrayed in her physicality by Stacey, making her into something that definitely isn't human when she's introduced into the story. So those were the 3 big battles. Everything else was like picking up bits and pieces of work to get everything finished. But those were the 3 big things. And what I mean by the big battles are the things that you'll sink quite a bit of your modest budget into just to get them right. Like, it feels to me like you can do 3 things, like, and you can focus a decent chunk of your budget on it, and the rest of it is just going to be individual firefighting battles trying to fix stuff and get it done. But introducing J3 as a very clearly non-human entity was very important. So, you know, the route we took for that was to take her legs off and have her suspended in the machine. So yeah, it's all Stacey right up until she had a pair of green trousers on. Honestly, some of the effects work was so down and dirty. It's like kind of a little bit embarrassing talking about it because it was so straightforward.
You're amongst friends, Gavin. Don't worry.
It was Stacey in full costume up to her hips, wearing green trousers, stood on an apple box. That was it, times 250.
So is it motion capture stuff in that sense?
No,
no,
it's no motion capture stuff.
Wow.
We tracked the cameras and put like a CG bit of a lower body with the hips on.
Yeah.
Not much. That's it. A little bit of tidying up some highlights and stuff on the suit, but not much.
That's amazing. Because I mean, you know, as you say, you won, right? Because she doesn't look human at all, except the eyes are clearly human, which are her eyes. And I was wondering which way you'd gone. Were they CGI?
No, I had to give her something to act with, because that prosthetic, it was a 3-part prosthetic covering her face, And she described it as what it would probably be like to have like really incredible Botox where you just can't move your face. And you know, Stacey was a great sport. That was 4.5 hours makeup in the morning, 2.5 to get it off. So she was there way before everybody else and went home way after. Well, she used to stick around so that she didn't feel bad. But yeah, she was doing the long hours with Stacey. And when she had that suit on, she was in it until she goes out of it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So yeah, we had to give her something to act with because she couldn't really move her face. And it was funny because when she was on set, she looked really scary because she just had this kind of stare because she couldn't really smile because the appliance would start to come off. And yeah, so she was just like blank faced and just staring, and people were getting a bit creeped out by her. But I thought that was cool because she was using that energy to like feed the performance, and she was like furious. I didn't quite realize at the time, but she'd be like really, really grumpy because she'd just been in the makeup chair for like, you know, 4.5 hours. So she'd be really quite peeved when she got on set, and it was freezing cold. It was like -10. We were in a warehouse in Hungary because we couldn't get in a studio, so we shot in a warehouse. So we had a couple of space heaters, but we could only heat a little volume at a time. So usually when we were shooting it, and we had to turn it all off to shoot, obviously. So it was really, really cold. And yeah, Stacey was basically freezing cold and super angry, like on a hair trigger anger all the time. So she was using that to drive the performance, which worked out really well.
She was channeling Lars von Trier at you the whole time, right?
Yeah.
And not another bastard.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, she was taught. She told me about how she was taught acting, and she had like a Japanese tutor who was like really savage with her, and they were like, you know, you will never complain, you will never ever give up. And she had this whole mantra which frames her psyche when she's working. And when we were shooting the stuff with the car crash, the flashback in the car crash, like the brief bit where after the accident where they're both in the car, she's leaning out over the smashed windscreen. And when we were shooting that, it was outside we couldn't heat any of that. It was at night and it was like -14, 15 when we were shooting that. Really cold, really, really cold. And they came out in big coats and it was like, quick, shove Theo and Stacey in the car and we'll shoot this as quick as we can. It's like, come on, everybody, let's go. And I had these two podcasts like in the car. Theo's like this against the wheel, and Stacey's like leaning over, not moving. And when we had to dress it super fast because it was so cold. So we had like the makeup team, and they had like a couple of like styrene foam cups with fake blood in and brushes, and they were dabbing it on like that. And I'm going, no time. Took the cups off her. Just
chucked it.
He's like, come on, film it. Let's do that. Get the fans on, blow all the water around. And Stacey had all this blood on it. She had her hand sticking out, and all this blood came off. And because it was on the bonnet, it took 10 minutes to shoot that, and then we're straight out of there. But I didn't know at the time, but the blood froze, and her hand froze to the car. And when I was like, okay, we're done, get out of here, she sort of moved her hand and it went like that, and she had the shape of the bonnet like flat on the blood. I felt so bad. But she didn't complain because she's like a robot.
Well, it's fascinating, but I wondered if we could sort of flip back just to the beginning, and it really fascinated me because, of course, not to sound vain, but I fully agree with you. I mean, I think Half-Life 2 has just been one of the most interesting rabbit holes that I've ever gone down. You know, just be it a book, film, game, or whatever else. But I mean, games are very much a kind of a boundless creative playground in many ways, I think, you know. And do you agree that perhaps maybe some of the most interesting ideas, inspirations are coming from, you know, games and other kind of like non-traditional sources? Because of course, you know, when you ask a filmmaker what their influences are, you usually hear, okay, it was Fellini, it was this and that. You don't usually hear, well, it was a PC game out, came about 20 years ago, aged really well, first person.
Off engine.
But it really was an astonishing achievement. I thought it was one of the first games I felt connected with. Right?
It's huge. And the thing is too, we live in Budapest, and that was the original inspiration for the architecture, was that Eastern Europe. So I was in City 17 whilst we were shooting. It was amazing.
Yeah.
You go to the railway station. Like, we were getting recce's around all these places when we were because we were trying to find some locations to lighten the budget a bit. And we found a few and we had to give a few up. And they were showing us around all these machine yards and stuff. And when we were looking for a straight up location to use to build the set, like just a physical space, they showed us around this like a machine shop where they used to build trains, and it was all decrepit and gone, but some of the machinery is still there. and it was these massive hangars with all this glass in the roof, and it was all broken and, you know, falling in. It's quite dangerous, but it was basically the railway station from the end of the end of the original Half-Life 2. You know, the big shootout in the railway station. It's that. And I'm in there. I'm just like, this is just so cool. It is City 17. And just exploring the city, you've got all those kind of like yellow, what's the word for it when they put the stuff on the bricks, like the sort of plaster on the bricks, it's like yellow. I always remember that the first time you step off the train in Half-Life 2 and you're out in the city square, that's just Budapest. And it's funny, I remember, because it was a good shoot, like we were really social and we spent quite a bit of time drinking and eating around town. And the local crew were great. They showed us around. I had a blast out there. It was so much fun. Met some great people and really good friends. And I just remember walking around Budapest drunk, just like thinking how wonderful it'd be to come back here one day and shoot the Half-Life 2 movie. You could just see it. You could just imagine a combined APC like blocking off the road and a bunch of goons in gas masks like bussing everybody off the street, shouting at them. Honestly, it's amazing.
It is amazing. And, you know, I suppose, you know, just as we, you know, pass the hour mark on the conversation, you know, it begs the question. I mean, because archive, you know, to bring the, you know, unfortunate, you know, realities of our world around us, it was, you know, it was, if I remember correctly, it was meant to have its first screenings at South by Southwest last year, of course, and it was released. You know, so some people who are watching, they might be curious because, of course, it's been released stateside, but now it is being released, I guess, in the UK and beyond in January.
18th of January in the UK, 6 clocks.
So in what format? How are people going to be able to see it?
Well, it's going to be digital. I mean, the original schedule was the 15th of January cinematic in theatres, in the theatrical, and then the 18th digital. But I mean, obviously, I don't expect much to be going on with the cinemas, unfortunately. So I'm presuming the original plan is still sticking, which is 18th digitally. So it's the 7th now. So in 11 days, you can treat yourself.
We're not, you know, we're not shy about advertising things. So which channels is that? I mean, is that Netflix? Is it Amazon? Is it Hulu?
They haven't told me. I don't know.
Oh, you don't know yet? All right. So
I don't know anything.
Sign up to all of them, kids, because you're going to have to see this film. So
available digitally.
Yeah. Follow us on Twitter. You'll catch us on.
Cool. I wanted to pick up on a question. Maybe Alex. I mean, maybe this is a moment if there are some questions from the audience. But while you're having a look on the side there, one thing I had because it's Space Rocks, music's an important part of film in general, but it's definitely an important part. Music and sound design. So how did that meet what you wanted from it in a sense? I mean, I'm just sort of thinking about Kubrick again, and you know the way that Kubrick famously used tracking tracks, Blue Danube, which he had no intention of actually using, but it ended up being the soundtrack. So you know, how did you go about that aspect of the film?
Well, the music particularly, it didn't really meet my expectations to what I wanted from the film. It completely smashed them and took it to a whole other level. I was working with Stephen Price, who got the Academy Award for Gravity in 2017, and I still can't quite believe how lucky I got working with that guy. He's a diamond of a man. He's tricky as well because I'm quite short. I'm like 5'6", and Stephen's like 6'5" or something. It's like the other numbers are the other way around. But he needs to be that big to fit all the talent inside him. He's just so good. I couldn't believe I got to work with him. I mean, really, with Archive, we just gave him the edit and just let him go with it. And he just, I mean, yeah, I have so much confidence working with people like that. One of the things that I love about working in film is being able to pull like talented people together for a kind of common cause, and then just letting them do the thing with it. And I mean, somebody like Stephen, like you don't need to. I can't tell Stephen Price what to do. What am I going to do? Like sit behind him and go, no, Stephen, not that piano key, this piano key.
But to what extent did you actually set a scene, or did you we've worked with Vangelis and know some other people in this business, and the famous story of Blade Runner 2049, right, with Johan Johansson being commissioned to do the soundtrack and then it not working out and it going to Hans Zimmer. How much did you put onto it and say this is the kind of sound palette I want, or did you just sort of say go for it?
Well, what we did do, I mean, having said what I just said about it's really awesome to like work with people. Excuse me. There is another side of my job when I'm working as director, is that I have to tell people if I'm not into something, and I might have to ask them to have another go at something, and it might be something that they're quite attached to. It can be all kinds of things like that that can come up. So I try and make it my business to get to know people, so that if we do have to have those conversations, we can do them in a kind of a nice, friendly manner instead of it maybe being weird. So I just try and take it out of, try and take the time to get to know people before we get in the trenches, if you like. So yeah, I mean, with people like Stephen and like Laurie Rose, who was a cinematographer and stuff, it's just great because kind of you've got an excuse to hang out with these like awesome, talented film people and like, you know, sort of get to become friends and stuff before you start working, which is just wonderful. So with Stephen, yeah, we just went out drinking quite a bit. We used to meet up in the BFI bar on the South Bank, have a few beers and just talk about things. He was like reading the script as the writing was happening. So, you know, we just talked about things. We talked about what we liked, what we didn't like. I mean, Stephen's one of those people who's just got ideas. He's a very humble guy, but he is a genius. And, you know, he always said from the beginning that he knew what he wanted it to be and he delivered it, you know. But one of the things that I really enjoyed, like when you've done something like making a film, there's certain bits that stick out for you, like little memories that you've got of moments that happened. And one of my favorite moments of the whole thing, funnily enough, was when we were recording the soundtrack. We had a cellist. We had a tiny budget. We couldn't really afford to do much. And most of the score was electronic that Stephen wrote. But we did have half a day with a cellist at Abbey Road. So, because Stephen knows all these like big orchestras and musicians and stuff, he had this like world-class cellist come in. I can't remember the chap's name, is in the credits, and got to work with him for like a morning. And we had a studio at Abbey Road, and that was just amazing because Stephen knows everybody, so he's taking me on little tours and showing me the you know, the Beatles studios and stuff. And it was when we were recording, it was the day after they'd just done, the night before they'd done what was it? It'll be in 2019. They did a big Beatles party. It was an anniversary of something. I can't remember what it was. An anniversary of one of their albums, and they just had that party the night before, and they were clearing everything up. And so we were in there recording, and Stephen took me for a little tour, and all the roadies and stuff are like clearing up, and you know, he knows everybody. So I was hanging out with all these like cool music people, which is not really my kind of normal crowd, if you know what I mean.
Right. Sorry, go ahead.
That was awesome. But being in the studio when the cello was being recorded was just phenomenal, because they recorded through all the pieces, and then we had like 15 minutes left. And Stephen was just like, okay, make some crazy noises with the cello. And I'm just sitting there going, oh, this is interesting. What are we going to do now? So the guy with the cello just starts making all these like strange noises. And he's in a sound booth, and we're in the mixing studio, and we've got the engineer at the desk, and he starts doing all this stuff, and Stephen stands up, and he's got this thing called a space box, I think it was called, and it was a piece of equipment with controls. And so Stephen starts doing all this stuff, and all these sounds start changing, and all of a sudden he did something, and it made this weird noise, and me and the engineer and Stephen all just kind of went and looked at him, and Stephen goes, do that again. So he started making this noise, and Stephen was like just locked in the zone. You know, when you're watching someone who's really good working at full attentive capacity, he just locked into this thing, and just, it was like you could see the whole world just went, and he was like messing with these controls, and these crazy noises were coming out. And he just let him run for 15 minutes, recorded all this stuff, and then just like turned around to me and went, very happy with that, let's go with it. And I was like, I don't even really know what I just witnessed, but I know it was awesome. And if you think it was awesome, yeah, I think it was awesome. And then all these really subtle sounds, he did all this work on there. So I could gush about Stephen all day. There's all this really subtle stuff in there. There's like, one of the things that I did have as a reference that I always loved was the, I forget the name of the track, the original music to Ghost in the Shell, you know, the animated movie from 95, the choir. I forget the name of the actual track, but that song, I just find that choir singing in that just really beautiful and really creepy and haunting, and it just does so much. It carries such a mood. And so that was something that I was always really keen on, but it was really just a touchstone. And I didn't realize until afterwards that he'd put a load of that stuff in there, and it was so subtly done that I didn't realize. And he asked me if I liked it. And I was like, wait, where is that? I'm not sure. And he played it and he's like, listen to this. And I was listening to it and I couldn't believe the amount of layers that he put in there. And there was one of the tracks, it's in the beginning of the film. And what it is, it's a woman singing archive in Japanese, and it's all distorted and twisted and it just repeats. And it's in there as a layer of music, and I hadn't even clocked it. And I must have watched it like 80 times, like through the course of the edit. And then he points it out and I was like, oh my God. And I got all goosebumps and stuff. And that's what someone like Stephen Price does. Like that's what you get.
Yeah. I think you picked up on something which has certainly been important to me in the last few years, and Space Rocks is a big part of that, is being able to interact with consummate professionals in their own field. I mean, it's one thing to know your own game, and you can kind of, in a way, you look at other people and, the way you not judge people, the way you view people is through a bit of a filter because you're in the same world. But when you see somebody in a different world where you don't have the licks, you don't have the skills, but you see them completely on song, in the zone, those are the people you want to work with, right?
Yeah.
Whatever you do in life, if you can find those people, work with them, because they just bring wonder, if in a sense, right? I don't even want to learn what they're doing because my life's full enough already. But to watch somebody else do that stuff that well, it's amazing.
So cool. It's that like rare moment of like it's like you're witnessing something. It's very cool.
Yeah. Which may even be mundane to that person in a sense because it's what they do every day. But you've kind of been let into their sanctum for a while.
Yeah. That's what it felt like. It was so cool.
Amazing.
Nothing like a bit of an imposter syndrome. I just sit at the back and drink my tea and with a big smile and just be like, yeah, carry on, awesome.
Well, I think Mark and I were very rightly gushing about Archive, just before we linked up today, and so it's wonderful to see a product of so many consummate artists, professionals, and vision as well, Gav. And I have to say, just a marvelous film and such a wonderful escape at a much needed time as well. I was actually going to ask you very briefly. So, if you're at Abbey Road, tell me you did the zebra crossing across the street. You must have.
No, I couldn't get close to it. You need to drive a snowplow through there to get everybody off that crossing.
Oh yeah,
hundreds of people, especially because they'd just done the Beatles thing too. It was double busy. I mean, I used to live in the area, so I'm familiar with the business of the the crossing and stuff, but it was really, really busy. Besides which, I got to say, you can't do all that stuff. You got to leave that to the tourists. I was there working.
Yeah, you got to be cool. I get it.
Yeah,
cool. Look, we've covered so much ground and so many ideas, and I feel as ever that this has to be just a continuance of the conversation, not a beginning or end, because there's so many things that we still have to explore with you. We've had some great questions and people watching us tonight. People asking, obviously, possibly a painful, thing, because of course you've just, finished this whole archive cycle, but what's next, current projects, things that, maybe.
It's all secret stuff I can't talk about. I've got three main projects. One of them's a sci-fi comedy. They're all in the sci-fi space because that's my big interest. And I feel like genre spaces are really fun to work in. And my sort of, the amount of fun I have world building sci-fi worlds, I can't ignore that. I've got to keep pushing that if I can get away with it. So I'm going to keep doing sci-fi stuff whilst they let me. So I have a full-on action film that I'm working on, a sci-fi action piece. I have a sci-fi comedy that I'm working on because I always kind of think that comedy is just something that is undervalued in the world. Maybe not undervalued. I think if you can make your work in an environment where there's just loads of people trying to make each other laugh, I don't think you could have a much nicer day at work than that. So yeah, sci-fi action film, sci-fi comedy, and the other one is I can't really. Oh, it's so annoying I can't talk about it. I could actually talk about this like all night, but I can't talk about it. But there's a franchise thing I'm going after as well, but I won't say any more than that. But cool. It's awesome, and if I can pull it off, it will be it'll be very cool, and I'll be happy.
That sounds very cool. Well, you're going to have to.
What a vague answer.
No, but I mean,
anything I could be more specific about. I'm sorry, it's just the nature of the beast.
The mind does wander, but
I've got cool conversation. I'm lucky enough that after Archive, I got representation in the States. So I'm being repped by CAA, which is like one of the biggest agencies in LA. And those guys are great. They've hooked me up with all these people. I've got these cool conversations going on, but it's not stuff that you can kind of talk about like this. So I've got to be all vague. But what I will say is I've never been as busy in my life.
Oh, that's good. Yeah,
That's
I mean,
great to hear.
particularly in current times, right? I mean, it's
Well, it's all writing stuff too, so it's it's the kind of soft bit at the moment, if you like, as far as needing. I don't need to pull a crew together right now. It's me working with a
right,
couple of other people remotely.
right.
Great stuff. Well, for everyone who's watching, January 18th is the big date if you're watching from the UK and beyond. And I mean, Gav, I've got to say, on behalf of everyone at Space Rocks, it's so nice to see you again. And thank you for sparing the time and all these brilliant ideas. It was a lovely escape from.
You're welcome. Could I there's just a final thought I'd just like to put out there.
Of course.
We're in weird times. We're in all kinds of in and out of lockdowns and all kinds of stuff. This pandemic's gone on for like nearly a year now, and it could go on for quite a bit longer. Like, we don't know. Seems like there's some light at the end of the tunnel, but we're hearing conflicting news all the time. Good news, bad news, and we just don't know. So I just wanted to say that, like, I finished Archive at the beginning of 2020, and my whole plan originally was I'll write my second film whilst I'm doing post for Archive. Now, all kinds of things happened during the post that required a lot more attention than was originally needed, which meant that I got no writing done through post, which meant I finished the film and came into 2020, having finished the film, just squeaked it in before lockdown, beginning of February, and I was beating myself up a bit because I hadn't got my next script ready, and we finished post. Then lockdown happened, and I thought, right, I'm going to spend all this time writing. I'm going to be super productive. It's all going to be awesome. Now, fast forward to January, like 2021, I still haven't got my next script finished, and I beat myself up every day about that. I just wanted to say that if you're in a creative field and you originally thought you were going to take advantage of lockdown and be really productive and do all of this stuff, and if it turns out you thought that and it hasn't quite worked out the way you thought it would, just try not to beat yourself up about it, because that's what's happened to me. And I know that's what's happened to my friends. I know the people that's happened to. So, it's everybody. So it's not just you. So if you can take a bit of solace from that and cut yourself a bit of slack, don't beat yourself up, because it is all of us.
Yeah, those wise words. Same in academia as well. We've heard the same thing. There's always a pressure. There's going to be another assessment. You've got to and they've got to be teaching university or at school as well. And I think, it's very important. Yeah. So thanks for those words. Really.
Very, very well said, and very appropriate. I mean, it's being kind to oneself these days. We're all carrying heavier burdens than is always apparent. Because let's just say it's a strange old moment for us all. But you've helped us escape it. And
come and watch some robots.
Indeed, I have an absolute pleasure. Now, before
so we have one small tradition which we do, which it's just because we only let one person escape for it. And I'm just looking, behind your head there with all the Star Wars memorabilia. The only person we let get away with this is another very famous robot. We had Anthony Daniels on, a C-3PO, pretty early on in Uplink. And we didn't make him do this, but you're not going to escape. And you'll understand why. So we finish with the Vulcan live long and prosper, and the
horns.
Space
and rocks. And so thanks very much, Gavin. Perfect. We'll talk to you soon, man.
Thanks so much, man.
Cheers,
right. See you soon, Gavin. Ciao.
Very good. Well, so there we are, Mark. Episode 34, but also episode 1 of 2021. And what a great start.
It's that time where you reset all the counters and you think, we've just done 1. It's like my cycling stats are horrible at the moment, but it's only because I'm only allowing 2021. But
don't mention Strava, but a great old year. And I'm not just saying it. I absolutely adored Archive, and I really just feel like I need to watch it again. Just such interesting stuff.
Yeah, I mean, people should just go and watch it and don't read anything about it. Don't read any spoilers. Don't read any reviews. I mean, we gave a few there, but it's. I watched it this afternoon and was drawn in, and the acting and the visual effects, the story, the whole thing. It's beautiful piece of work, and just happy that we had Gavin on beforehand so we can claim all the credit for it, right?
Indeed, absolutely. But yeah, can't wait to see what he does next, and I'll be thinking about what franchises.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very good. Well, as ever, thanks everyone for joining us. Sign up to our newsletter at spacerocksofficial.com, and Mark, as ever, an absolute pleasure to see you.
Yeah, we'll see whether we're back next week or in a couple of weeks' time. We'll see how it goes. But maybe a slow start to the year, but